I didn't expect the Winter Awards Gala to be anything but a long, formal affair, but when I walked into the ballroom, I instantly knew something was off. My name is Mark. I'm an architect, married to Laura, and we have a newborn son, Ethan. The gala was supposed to be a celebration of my firm's achievements, but from the moment we entered, I could feel it wasn't going to be about me. We were greeted at the door by my parents, who were practically glowing. My mother wrapped me in a hug that was just a little too tight, a little too lingering. "Mark, darling, you look wonderful," she said, her voice higher than usual. "And look at little Ethan. He's so grown already." "Thank you, Mom," I replied, giving Laura a quick smile as I adjusted Ethan's carrier. But as I turned to introduce Laura and Ethan to a few colleagues, I felt it, the shift. The air in the room seemed to thicken, as if everyone was waiting for something, and then I saw her. Clara, my younger sister, the famous interior designer and social media personality. She breezed in, fashionably late, a camera crew trailing behind her like she was the star of a reality show. Clara, my parents nearly leaped to greet her, voices so excited it was almost like they hadn't seen her in years. Clara smiled that perfect, practiced smile, her eyes flicking over the room as she posed for the cameras. Well, Clara said with a dramatic sigh, adjusting her sleek, black dress. "Don't you just love the atmosphere here?" She let out a little laugh, and the camera crew captured every second. "Let's take a few behind-the-scenes shots," she announced to her crew, without even acknowledging me or my family. They moved to rearrange the seating, all in the name of making sure Clara's shot was perfect. I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening as I stood there, watching Clara monopolize the evening. My parents were too busy doting on her to notice. "Isn't it amazing?" my mom asked as Clara gave a speech to the camera about how beautiful the venue was. "She's so talented, don't you think?" "Yeah," I muttered, staring at the floor. I didn't want to make a scene, but it wasn't easy. The fact that Clara was turning the evening into her own photo shoot while ignoring my accomplishments, my son's first outing, was starting to get under my skin. "Mark," Laura whispered, trying to ease the tension in my jaw, "don't let it get to you." "I'm trying not to," I replied, forcing a smile. But inside, I felt something building up. It wasn't just the gala anymore. It was years of feeling overlooked and overshadowed by Clara. She'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was left to fight for attention. As the dinner progressed, I noticed Ethan starting to get fussy in his carrier. He had been a little restless all night, his tiny face scrunching up as he fought against sleep. Laura, always the attentive mother, shifted in her seat. "I'll take him for a walk around the ballroom," she said, standing up gently, ready to soothe him. But before she could leave, Clara's voice rang out, high and insistent. "Oh, no, leave him here. Let him cry for a bit. It'll add some real emotion to my footage." I turned to look at Clara, my face going cold. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know," Clara said, still talking to her camera crew, "sometimes it's about the raw, real moments. A little crying makes it more authentic." My stomach churned. "Laura, let's go," I said firmly, standing up. Clara was always the one who got to call the shots in the family, always the one whose whims were catered to, and tonight was no different. As Laura walked toward the exit with Ethan, Clara looked over her shoulder and said, "It's all for the content. Don't take it personally. We'll all laugh about it later." I didn't say anything, but the seed of anger had already been planted. It wasn't just about tonight, about the gala. It was about Clara's constant need to be the center of attention, about how my achievements were always pushed aside in favor of her brand. And just as I thought I might be able to shrug it off and enjoy the rest of the evening, something unexpected happened. My father, with his usual obliviousness, raised his glass and made a toast, calling attention to Clara's latest project and then to me. He added quickly, as an afterthought, "And to Mark, of course, the architect who never seems to be around anymore." The words stung, even if they were meant to be a light joke. Clara smiled, soaking in the praise. I watched as the crowd clapped for her, as she basked in the limelight once again, while I stood there, the feeling of being invisible sweeping over me like a tide. In that moment, I realized something. Ethan wasn't the only one who needed my attention. I needed to stop letting my family and Clara dictate my worth. Tonight, I wasn't just going to sit back and watch. I was going to make my own mark, even if it meant stepping out of the shadow of the one person who always seemed to steal it. The rest of the evening moved like a slow-motion train wreck. Clara continued to film, barely acknowledging any of us. My parents, oblivious as ever, basked in her glow, happily rearranging the schedule for her. Dinner was delayed, speeches were long-winded, and every time I tried to get a word in, Clara's camera crew swooped in to capture the magic. Laura, thankfully, was good at maintaining her calm through it all. Ethan had finally dozed off in her arms, giving her a brief moment of peace. She was just about to settle back into her seat when Clara's voice rang out again, loud and obnoxious. Okay, let's get some authentic family footage at the table," Clara said, positioning herself in front of the camera. "Get everyone together. This will be gold for my followers." I couldn't stop my jaw from clenching. Clara hadn't acknowledged that it was Ethan's first public outing, or that it had been a huge night for me, my success, my career, but it was all about her social media presence. She wasn't even making an effort to pretend to care about us. It was just about getting the best shot for her feed. Laura, already exhausted from the evening, shifted Ethan in her arms. I'm going to take him for a walk, just for a few minutes, she said, trying to offer some peace. But Clara was having none of it. She was already directing her camera crew, tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the table. No, we need this moment. Let him cry, just for a minute. It'll show the emotional depth of the night. Real emotion, right? It's better for the footage. The words hit me like a slap to the face. Clara, that's enough, I said, my voice low but steely. You don't tell Laura how to handle our son. But Clara, as always, wasn't about to back down. She turned to me with a look of mild amusement, like I was overreacting. It's just a little crying, Mark. It'll add to the authentic vibe. Laura's hands tightened around Ethan's carrier, clearly trying to hold back frustration. She stood up, planning to take him out of the room, but before she could move, Clara leaned over the table, her voice cutting through the tension. Honestly, it's not a big deal. A little crying will really help, Clara said, her eyes gleaming. She leaned closer to Ethan, who was starting to fuss in his sleep, and without warning, without even a second thought, she raised her hand and slapped Ethan's tiny hand and face. My world tilted. The sound of her slap was deafening, and the entire room froze. I couldn't breathe. Laura gasped, her face white with shock and disbelief. My parents looked horrified, but they didn't move, didn't speak. My mother's eyes darted around, but they landed on Clara like she was the only one in the room. My father, always the passive observer, stayed silent. Did you just hit him? I asked, barely able to control the rage seeping through my voice. Clara didn't flinch. It's discipline, Mark, she said flippantly, as if it was no big deal. He needs to learn to settle down. It'll teach him respect. That was it. That was the final straw. Get out, Clara. Now, I said, rising to my feet, my voice thick with anger. For a moment, she didn't move. She blinked, as if she couldn't believe what I was saying. Then, her eyes narrowed, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. What's the big deal? She asked, trying to turn it into some kind of joke. It's not like I hurt him. My blood was boiling, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't care about keeping the peace. I didn't care about the family dynamics. I don't care if it was a joke or not, I said, stepping closer. You will not lay a finger on my son, and you will not do it in front of me. Leave. The silence in the room was so thick, I could hear the faint hum of the chandelier overhead. The camera crew had stopped filming, sensing the tension. Clara's bravado faltered for a second as she looked around, but she stood her ground. You can't be serious, she said, her voice suddenly small, defensive. I'm very serious, I said, stepping closer, voice now cold and controlled. You'll leave, now. She didn't respond immediately, but the air around her seemed to shift. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she stood up, huffing in frustration. Fine, she muttered, gathering her camera crew with one swift motion. I'll go. Don't be so dramatic, Mark. I watched her storm out, the door slamming behind her, but the damage was already done. I turned to Laura, who was still standing, holding Ethan tightly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Are you okay? I asked, my voice softening as I approached her. She nodded, though I could see the tears threatening to spill over. I'm fine. It's just not okay, Mark. I can't believe she did that. I felt the same way. I'd never seen Clara's behavior as anything more than narcissistic antics in the past, but now I saw something far darker. This wasn't a one-off. This was part of a pattern I'd been ignoring for years. And in that moment, I realized I couldn't ignore it any longer. Clara had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I gently took Ethan from Laura, holding him close. Let's go home, I said softly, my heart still racing. It wasn't just about the slap. It was about the years of being sidelined, of watching Clara take control of every family moment, no matter how big or small. This was the tipping point, the last time I'd let her manipulate me, or anyone else, into thinking she could do whatever she wanted. As we made our way out, I knew I was done playing the supporting role in Clara's perfect life. The drive home was a blur of silence. Ethan had fallen asleep in my arms, his little face peaceful despite the chaos of the night. Laura sat next to me, her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring out the window. I could tell she was holding it together, but I could see the storm brewing beneath the surface. We got home and settled in, and for a while, everything was quiet. The weight of the evening hung between us like a thick fog. I couldn't stop replaying the moment when Clara slapped Ethan's hand. My blood boiled every time the memory resurfaced, but I tried to focus on getting Ethan settled for the night, making sure he was comfortable in his crib before walking into the living room. Laura was already sitting on the couch, her head in her hands. I'm so sorry, Laura, I said quietly as I sat beside her. I should have handled it better. I don't know why I didn't step in sooner. She shook her head, wiping away a tear. It's not your fault, Mark, but I can't believe she did that. How could she? I don't know, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. I really don't know. She's always been selfish, but this was something else. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us processing what had happened. But the silence didn't last long. My phone buzzed, and I knew instantly it was my parents. I looked at it for a moment before answering. Hello, Mark, my mother's voice came through, a bit frantic. I just got off the phone with Clara. She's upset. She says you overreacted. That you're making a scene over nothing. I felt my heart tighten in my chest. I glanced at Laura, who was already staring at me, her face a mirror of my own frustration. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't care what Clara says. She crossed a line tonight. Listen, my mother interrupted. I know you're upset, but this is family. You can't let one little argument tear everything apart. Little argument. I snapped, my patience wearing thin. She hit my son, Mom. She slapped him in front of everyone. You call that a little argument? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, my mother sighed. Mark, I know it's upsetting, but you need to understand that Clara didn't mean any harm. She's just stressed, and sometimes, she doesn't think before she speaks. You know how she is. I could feel the anger rising in me. I don't care if she's stressed. You're telling me that slapping a baby is something that can just be brushed off because she's stressed? Well, no, my mother said softly. But you're blowing this out of proportion. You know how Clara is. She didn't mean it. She's just trying to get content for her social media. You know how much she loves what she does. I was speechless for a moment. I'm sorry, but that's not an excuse. You're defending her after what she did to Ethan? Mark, please. My mother's tone softened, but there was no mistaking the underlying pressure. I'm not saying she's right, but you need to let it go. Family is about forgiving. I shook my head, unable to process how she could be so dismissive. No, Mom. It's about respecting each other. And Clara has never respected me, you, or Laura. She's been given a free pass her entire life, and I'm done with it. Before my mother could respond, the line went silent. I had heard enough. I hung up and sat back, letting the anger settle inside me like a weight in my chest. Laura didn't say anything for a while, but I could feel her eyes on me. What did they say? She asked, her voice calm, but laced with concern. They're siding with Clara, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. Mom said I'm blowing it out of proportion. That Clara didn't mean it, that it's no big deal. Laura let out a frustrated sigh. Mark, this is exactly what they always do, isn't it? They never take your side. They just sweep it under the rug and tell you to let it go. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Yeah, it's like I'm supposed to just accept it. Like nothing I do matters unless I'm supporting Clara. That's because it's always been about Clara, Laura said softly, but there was a sharpness to her voice. And no matter what you do, it will never be enough. She'll always be the golden child, and you'll always be the one who gets overlooked, even when you're doing the right thing. I felt a pang in my chest. I knew she was right. I'd spent years trying to prove myself to my family, to get their recognition. But no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, I was always the one who came up short. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Clara. Clara, Mark, I think you overreacted tonight. I know you're mad, but this is a family event. Don't make it bigger than it is. I'm not going to apologize for trying to capture the moment. Everyone else was fine with it. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Clara's words were a slap in the face, just like everything else tonight. She still didn't get it. She didn't understand that this wasn't about her social media. It was about family, about Ethan, about the boundaries she'd crossed. I showed the message to Laura, who clenched her jaw in frustration. She's unbelievable, Laura muttered. She just doesn't care. I let the silence fill the room again as I pondered my next move. I had a feeling Clara wouldn't stop, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. I wasn't going to let her run over me, or my family, just because she had a platform. Mark, Laura said, breaking the silence. You have to stop letting them make you feel small. This isn't just about Clara. This is about your parents, too. They've been enabling her for years. I looked at her, and for the first time, I realized she was right. This wasn't just about Clara. It was about everything she represented. The favoritism, the constant dismissal of my efforts, the lack of support from the people who should have had my back. I took a deep breath. I'm done, I said quietly, my voice steady. I'm not letting her or anyone else control me anymore. And I'm not going to let this go. I'm going to make it right, for Ethan. Laura smiled at me, her eyes filled with pride. Good. It's about time you stood up for yourself. And that's when I knew. I couldn't keep living in Clara's shadow. I couldn't keep accepting the scraps my family threw my way. It was time to take control. This was only the beginning. The days after the gala were heavy with tension. Clara's message had stung, and my parents' lack of support only added salt to the wound. I couldn't stop thinking about the slap, about how easily Clara dismissed what she'd done, and how my parents acted like it was just another family squabble to be swept under the rug. They didn't get it. No one got it. As I tried to focus on work and be present with Laura and Ethan, the phone calls came in, relentless and insistent. It started with my mom, of course. The phone rang as I was having breakfast with Laura. I glanced at it and saw her name. I didn't feel like picking up, but Laura gave me a look, one that said, "You might want to at least hear her out." I exhaled, swiping the screen. "Hey, Mom." Mark. Her voice was calm, but there was a noticeable edge to it, like she was trying to control the conversation before it even started. I just wanted to check in. I know things were a little tense the other night, but Clara, and I think it's time to move past it. I could feel my frustration building. Move past it. Mom. Clara hit Ethan. That's not something I can just move past. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I know, Mark, but she didn't mean any harm. She's just passionate about her work, and sometimes she gets caught up in it. You know how she is. I could hear my mother's voice trembling a little. But she's family. Don't let this little argument ruin everything. We need to keep the peace, especially with everything that's been happening. You know how much Clara's going through. I bit back a laugh, a bitter one. How much she's going through. Mom, she's the one who slapped my son, not the other way around. You're defending her? It's not about defending anyone, my mother said quickly, her voice strained. It's about family. We don't always agree, but we stick together. We've always been there for you, Mark. We've always had your back. Have you? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Because every time I try to stand up for myself, every time I try to say something, you just sweep it under the rug. There was a long silence, and I could practically hear my mother weighing her next words. Look, Mark, she finally said, softer now. I'm just asking you to let it go. Clara didn't mean it. She's sorry, and we all want to move on from this. For the sake of the family. Sorry. I scoffed, the anger bubbling over. She slapped my son. Mom, and you're telling me she's sorry? Do you even hear yourself? I hear you, she said, her voice softer, almost pleading. But you need to think about the bigger picture. We need to keep things harmonious, Mark, for the family. Don't let this tear us apart. I couldn't listen to it anymore. I'm done, I said, my voice cold. I'm done letting Clara or anyone else make excuses for their behavior. This is not just about the family, Mom. This is about me standing up for my son. And I'm not backing down. I hung up before she could respond, the weight of the conversation crashing down on me. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had always tried to be the good son, the one who did everything for everyone. But now, I was being told to let it go. Just let it go. Are you okay? Laura asked softly, her hand on my shoulder. I nodded, but it was more of a reflex than anything else. Yeah, I muttered, rubbing my forehead. I'm fine. I don't know how they can't see it. How they can't see what Clara did. Laura didn't say anything at first. She just sat with me in the silence. After a while, she spoke again. Mark, they're not going to see it. Not the way you do. They're too wrapped up in their own lives. And Clara? She's their golden girl. They'll never hold her accountable. Not the way they should. I sighed. I'm so tired of being the one who gets overlooked, who gets pushed aside. My whole life, I've been the one to help everyone else. And this is how they repay me. Don't let them get to you, Laura said, her voice firm. You know what's right. You know what you did was the right thing. And you don't need their approval to stand up for your son. I nodded, but it didn't stop the lingering feeling in my chest. I wanted my parents' support. I wanted to feel like I mattered to them, like I wasn't always the one left behind. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep chasing after it. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own peace for their approval. The phone buzzed again, and this time, I didn't even check the screen. I knew it was my dad, probably calling to tell me the same thing my mother had, that I was being unreasonable, that I should just let it go. Instead, I let it ring, and I stared out the window, feeling the weight of everything crash down around me. Minutes later, the phone buzzed again, and I checked it. This time, it was Clara. Clara, Mark, I know you're upset, but I'm not the one who should be apologizing. You made a scene at the gala, and now you're dragging the whole family into it. You need to stop acting like I did something unforgivable. I'm not going to apologize for doing what I do best. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be around. I read the message 3 times, each time the sting cutting deeper. She still didn't get it. She still didn't understand why what she did was so wrong. Laura looked at me, her face filled with concern. What did she say? I showed her the message, and she let out a frustrated breath. She's unbelievable. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, a tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep. I can't keep doing this, Laura. I can't keep bending over backward for them. Not anymore. Laura's eyes softened, and she took my hand. You're not alone in this, Mark. I'm with you, and Ethan's with you. You don't need anyone else to validate you. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her support, but I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The family pressure was going to keep coming. Clara wasn't going to back off, and neither were my parents. But I wasn't going to back down either. It was time to stand my ground, and I wasn't going to let them silence me anymore. As the phone buzzed again, I let it ring. They were going to have to deal with the consequences of their actions. All of them. The next few days passed in a haze of anger and disbelief. Clara's message and the lack of support from my parents had left me reeling. I had hoped that after everything, after standing up for Ethan and putting my foot down, things would somehow settle. But that wasn't going to happen. It only took a couple of days before I saw Clara's post. My heart sank when I opened the app on my phone. There, on her Instagram feed, was a highly polished video titled Family Drama and Lessons Learned. The caption underneath read, "A lesson in parenting and boundaries. Sometimes, family doesn't get it, but we keep learning and growing. Hashtag family drama, hashtag parenting, hashtag lessons learned." I clicked the video, my stomach tightening. Clara, looking perfectly poised as always, sat in front of the camera. She had the perfect soft smile, the one that made her look like the victim, no matter what the situation was. She started speaking, and I could hear her usual sugary tone. I've always believed that family should come first, but sometimes, When you try to be the best version of yourself, it's hard to make everyone happy, Clara began, her voice lilting as though she was giving a heartfelt confession. My brother Mark, well, he's a bit overprotective, especially when it comes to his newborn son, Ethan. She paused, her eyes dropping for a second as if she was about to tear up. The other night, I did something that I didn't think would upset anyone, but it clearly did, and I want to clear the air. Yes, Ethan cried, but that's just life. It's what kids do. I don't see why that should be such a big deal. I could feel my blood start to boil, but I couldn't stop watching. I was just trying to capture the real moments, Clara continued. We all have our ways of dealing with things, and I think the situation at the gala just got blown out of proportion. I'm sorry if it hurt anyone, but I can't apologize for doing what I do. I'm not going to let anyone make me feel guilty for being authentic. My brother, though he's really upset, I just hope he can understand that it's not about him or his family. It's about me being true to myself. She finished the video with a tearful smile, looking like she had just won some moral victory. The whole thing was designed to paint her as the misunderstood family member. The caption at the bottom of the post had hundreds of comments, most of them praising Clara for her vulnerability and courage. But when I scrolled through them, I could already see the direction this was going. At Happy Hannah 13, Clara, you're such a boss. I don't get why Mark is making this such a big deal. Parents get upset over the smallest things these days. At Live Love Love, you handled that so well, Clara. Family can be such drama sometimes. You keep doing you, girl. 2 hearts. At Mama 3 boys. I mean, seriously, kids cry. What's the big deal? Mark should chill. You didn't hurt him. You were just doing your thing. At Real Housewife _forever. I can't believe your brother is blowing this out of proportion. He needs to get over it. Family shouldn't try to control what you do. I felt a surge of anger, frustration, and humiliation flood through me. She was turning the story around. Clara was portraying herself as the victim, making me look like the unreasonable, overprotective parent. And, of course, my parents were nowhere to be found, still silent as always. Laura walked into the living room just as I was scrolling through the comments. She saw my face, the look of disbelief, and immediately crossed the room to sit beside me. Is that what I think it is? She asked quietly, glancing at my phone. I nodded, the tightness in my chest making it hard to breathe. She's making it look like I'm the bad guy, like I overreacted to something that was no big deal. She's twisting everything. Laura's face hardened as she looked at the screen. This is exactly what we were afraid of. She's not taking responsibility for her actions. Instead, she's spinning it to make herself look good, and your parents are letting her get away with it. I felt a lump form in my throat. The betrayal hurt, deeper than I had expected. It's not just about Clara. It's about everything. How they've all let her do whatever she wants, and how no one ever listens to me. They don't care about me. They just care about how things look. Laura rubbed my back, trying to comfort me, but I was beyond comfort at that point. She's going to use this as content, isn't she? I asked, my voice flat. She's using everything, including our son, for likes and followers. I'm so sorry, Mark, Laura whispered, her eyes full of sympathy. But you're not going to let her win. We've got to take control of this. You've already been patient with this family for so long, but you've got to protect Ethan now. I knew she was right. Clara had crossed a line. My family had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to just sit back and let them use us to boost their own egos. I stood up, grabbing my phone. I'm going to do something about this, I said firmly. What do you mean? Laura asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what really happened, I said, determination setting in my voice. Clara can't keep playing the victim while she's the one who caused all this. And my parents, I hesitated. My parents need to understand that I'm not going to let them gaslight me anymore. Laura nodded, supporting me without hesitation. Do what you need to do. Just remember, I've got your back. I took a deep breath and started typing. I wasn't going to stand by while Clara twisted the narrative. I wasn't going to let her make this about her social media followers while ignoring the real pain she'd caused. I opened a post of my own, one that would tell the truth. It wasn't going to be pretty, and I knew the fallout would be huge. But it was time for the truth to come out. It was time to stop pretending. And for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity, of power. I wasn't going to let Clara get away with this. I hit send. The post went live, and I waited. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My post had gone up, and the fallout was immediate. I knew there would be backlash, but nothing could have prepared me for how quickly it all snowballed. Clara's followers flooded my comments section with insults, calling me everything from overbearing to toxic. Some even called me a bad parent for daring to speak up. It was exactly what I had expected from her audience. But the most painful part was watching my family's silence. Clara had turned the narrative completely on its head, and my parents were still unwilling to take a stand. But the worst part? The message I had sent out hadn't even made it to the family yet. It wasn't just a social media battle. It was about to become a full-fledged family war. That's when I got the call. It was late one evening. I had been lying on the couch with Laura, the weight of the last few days making me feel heavy with exhaustion. We hadn't heard from my parents, and Clara had been eerily quiet since my post. I had just started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd back off when the phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but something told me I should pick it up. Hello, I said cautiously, my hand tightening around the phone. "Mark," a voice said from the other end, a voice that I hadn't heard in years. "It's Irene." Irene was my aunt, my mother's sister. She had always been the one person in the family who didn't take sides. She had stayed out of the petty arguments, the family drama, the constant favoritism. She was a quiet observer, someone who always seemed to know things no one else did. And yet, in all the years I'd known her, I'd never really felt like we were close. She lived in a different state, and our interactions were limited to holiday phone calls or the occasional visit. "What's going on, Irene?" I asked, sitting up on the couch, sensing something important in her voice. "I've been hearing things," she said softly, as if she wasn't sure if she should be talking to me about it. "Things about Clara, about how she's been treating you, and about how your parents are handling this whole mess." I frowned, my stomach tightening. "What do you mean? What have you heard?" Irene paused, then spoke in a voice filled with a quiet anger that I hadn't heard before. "Mark, I've been meaning to tell you something. It's about Clara. Something you don't know." I sat up straighter, my mind racing. "What are you talking about? What's going on?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then Irene spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara's not who you think she is. She's done things in the past, things that no one wants to talk about." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "What are you saying? What has she done?" Irene's voice dropped even lower. "Clara's always been the golden child, hasn't she? Always the one everyone doted on, the one who could do no wrong. But that's not the whole story, Mark. She's been getting away with things for years. Things she shouldn't have been allowed to get away with." My heart pounded in my chest. "What kind of things?" I could hear Irene exhale on the other end, the weight of her words heavy. "When she was younger, she was reckless, careless. She'd hurt people, hurt kids, and no one would ever hold her accountable. Not your parents, not anyone." I didn't say anything then, but now I can't stay quiet anymore. I felt my head spin. "What do you mean? What kind of things?" There was a long pause before Irene spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "She hurt her cousins, several of them, when they were younger. I don't think you ever knew, but I was there, Mark. I saw it. She was rough with them. She would slap them, push them down, and no one ever did anything. Your parents always protected her. They said she was just going through a phase, that she'd grow out of it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Clara, my sister, the one I had always viewed as perfect, had hurt people, and it had been covered up? How could my parents have let this go on without saying a word? "Irene, why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because I've seen what she's done to you, Mark," Irene said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've seen how she's manipulated everyone in this family. I've seen how she's turned everyone against you. And I can't stand by and watch it happen again. Your parents are still protecting her, still making excuses for her behavior. But I won't." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just about Clara slapping Ethan. This was a history of manipulation, of abuse, of getting away with things because she was the golden child. It was all falling into place. The patterns, the way my parents had always let Clara get away with anything while I was expected to play by the rules. "What do I do, Irene?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do I even process this?" "I don't know," Irene said quietly. "But I do know that you need to protect your family, your son. You need to stand firm, Mark. I've seen Clara do this to people before, and she will never stop. Your parents will never hold her accountable. But you can make a difference." I sat back, stunned, trying to wrap my mind around everything Irene had just said. Clara had been hurting people for years, and now, here I was, trying to protect my own son from her manipulation. "I can't let her get away with this again," I said, more to myself than to Irene. "I can't let her hurt Ethan the way she's hurt so many others." Irene was quiet for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice filled with quiet strength. "You're doing the right thing, Mark. You're doing what needs to be done, and I'm here for you, whenever you need to talk." "Thank you, Irene," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to do yet, but I'm going to make sure this stops, once and for all." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of Irene's revelations settled over me like a storm. Clara had been hiding this dark side for years, and my parents had turned a blind eye to it. But no more. I wasn't going to let her get away with this any longer. It was time to make sure Clara's actions didn't go unchecked. It was time to stop the gaslighting. For Ethan, for Laura, and for me. I just wasn't sure how far this fight was going to take me, or what it would cost. But one thing was clear. I wasn't backing down anymore. The following days felt like a slow burn, the tension rising steadily as Clara's narrative continued to spread. It was clear that she wasn't going to back down. Every time I checked my phone, there was a new post, a new story on her feed. The more I tried to resist, the louder her voice became. And my parents? They were still silent, waiting for me to make the first move. But I had already made my decision. It was time to fight back. The first sign that this wasn't going to be a normal family squabble came a week after my post. I woke up to an email from Clara's lawyer, a sleekly formatted letter with the subject line, "Cease and desist, defamation and harassment." I stared at it for a moment, disbelief creeping in. A lawyer? For a family dispute? Clara wasn't just trying to manipulate the situation on social media. She was escalating it, using her image to intimidate me into silence. I opened the letter, scanning its contents quickly. It was exactly what I'd feared. Clara was accusing me of defamation for my post, claiming I was making false accusations and damaging her reputation with lies. The letter demanded that I remove all social media posts, retract my statements, and cease all further communication about the incident. If I refused, they threatened legal action for emotional distress and reputational damage. I felt the anger rising in my chest again, hot and insistent. Of course she's using a lawyer, I muttered under my breath. This was never about the truth. It's always been about her image. Laura, who had been sitting nearby, overheard me and looked over my shoulder at the letter. So now she's threatening to sue you? She asked, her voice low. She's accusing me of defamation, I said, running a hand through my hair, saying I've damaged her brand with my lies. I felt a sick laugh bubble up in my throat. What a joke. Laura leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. You have every right to tell your side of the story, Mark. She can't silence you with threats. You didn't do anything wrong. She's just trying to intimidate you, to get you to back down. I know. I ran my fingers across the top of the email, but I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever again. With that, I clicked on the link to her lawyer's contact information and opened a blank email. I had a plan. A few hours later, after drafting and reviewing the email a couple of times, I sent a response. It wasn't a long email. It wasn't meant to be. I was done with long explanations and trying to make Clara or anyone else see my side. I wasn't apologizing, and I wasn't retracting a thing. Subject: response to cease and desist. Dear lawyer's name, I have reviewed the claims made in your client's cease and desist letter. As I have already stated, the statements I made regarding Clara's actions at the awards gala are true, and I stand by them. I will not be removing any content or retracting any statements. Furthermore, I would like to inform you that any legal action your client wishes to pursue will be met with a full defense based on the truth of my claims. As I am sure you are aware, truth is a complete defense to defamation. If your client proceeds with this baseless threat, I will be forced to gather evidence to substantiate my claims, including testimonies from witnesses present at the gala, as well as documentation from my family regarding Clara's history of harmful behavior. Should Clara choose to escalate this matter, I will also be considering the potential for legal counterclaims regarding harassment and defamation against my family, as her actions have clearly been designed to publicly damage my reputation. I hope this clarifies my position. Sincerely, Mark, last name. As soon as I hit send, I felt a wave of relief. The uncertainty had been the hardest part. I had been holding my breath, waiting for the next move, but now I had made it. Clara wasn't going to intimidate me any longer. Laura looked over at me from across the room, a mixture of pride and concern on her face. You did the right thing, Mark. She's not going to know what hit her. I nodded, though the weight of it still hung on me. I knew this wasn't over. It had just started. The email was sent. The ball was in Clara's court now. The next day, I received a reply, quicker than I had anticipated. The response was sharp, legalese heavy, and threatening, demanding a retraction or immediate legal consequences. But there was something else in that letter, a subtle shift that I couldn't ignore. Clara's lawyer was now offering a settlement. Subject: response to cease and desist. Dear Mr. Last Name, my client, Clara, last name, wishes to avoid prolonged legal proceedings and is willing to settle this matter privately. In exchange for the immediate removal of all online posts and a retraction of your statements, Clara is prepared to offer a financial settlement in consideration of the emotional distress caused by your actions. This offer is made with the understanding that both parties agree to confidentiality and a public statement acknowledging that the dispute has been resolved amicably. Should you decline this offer, we will proceed with legal action as previously outlined. Sincerely, lawyer's name. I read the letter twice, then showed it to Laura. She looked just as stunned as I felt. Is she serious? Laura asked, her voice incredulous. She's offering you money to shut up? To buy your silence? Yep, I said, my voice tight with disgust. She's trying to silence me with a check. She's willing to pay for a retraction and a public apology. Laura stood up and started pacing. She thinks she can just throw money at the problem and make it go away. I'm not surprised, but this is ridiculous. Mark, you can't take the money. She's trying to buy your silence, your integrity, everything. I'm not taking it, I said firmly. This isn't about money. It's about truth. She doesn't get to pay her way out of this. I'm proud of you, Laura said, stopping in front of me. She can't buy your silence, and you're not going to let her manipulate you. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders. I'm not backing down, Laura. No matter what she tries, I'm not going to let her get away with this. It's time to end the gaslighting once and for all. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. I glanced at the clock. It was still early, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I'll get it, Laura said, walking toward the door. But as she opened it, I could already hear the voice. My parents. And I knew exactly what was coming. I could hear the muffled voices as Laura opened the door, followed by the soft sound of the door creaking. The moment I recognized my parents' voices, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew what was coming. This wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Laura came back into the room, her face tight with frustration. Mark, your parents are here, she said, her voice barely containing the edge of annoyance. They say they need to talk. I didn't even need to say anything. I stood up, brushing my hand across my face as I tried to steady myself. The exhaustion was settling in, tired of the lies, tired of the manipulation, tired of being the one who had to fight for respect. It had been building for years. The truth was out now, and it seemed like no one wanted to accept it. I walked toward the living room, where my parents were waiting. They were standing in the middle of the room, as if they expected to find me sitting there, ready to make nice. "Mark," my mother began, her voice sweet, but laced with that familiar tone of control. "We've been trying to reach you. I know you're upset, but you're taking this too far. Clara's just—" "No, Mom." I cut her off, my voice firm, my patience running thin. "You don't get to sweep this under the rug anymore. Clara slapped Ethan, and you're still defending her." My father opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. "No, Dad. Don't even start with the family is family speech. I'm done. You've both been enabling Clara for years, and it's time I make my stance clear. I'm done being the quiet one. I'm done being the backup plan." My mother's face tightened as she looked at me, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Mark, you're being dramatic," she said, though there was a tremor in her voice now. "This is just a misunderstanding. Clara didn't mean it. It's not something you should tear the family apart over. You're making it bigger than it needs to be." I shook my head, taking a step toward them. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't something I'm just supposed to let slide. Clara has always gotten away with everything. She has always been the center of attention, and no one ever held her accountable. And now, she crossed a line. A big one. My father, always the passive one, shifted on his feet, looking uncomfortable. "Mark," he said, his voice low and steady, "we understand you're upset, but maybe you should just let this go. You're making it harder than it needs to be. Let it go." I repeated, incredulity in my voice. "No, I'm not letting this go. Not this time. I'm not going to be the one who's constantly ignored. I'm not going to keep taking the scraps and pretending like everything's fine." My mother took a step toward me, her voice softening. "Mark, please," she said, her eyes filled with something close to guilt, but also a hint of annoyance. "This is family. You can't just sever ties over one incident. Clara didn't mean any harm. She was just caught up in the moment." I turned to Laura, who was standing behind me, her arms crossed. She had been silent throughout the entire exchange, but I could see the storm in her eyes. She was just as fed up as I was. "This isn't just about one incident," Laura said, her voice cool but firm. "This is about the years of neglect, the years of manipulation, and the constant enabling. Clara's actions at the gala were just the final straw. Mark is standing up for his son. He's standing up for his family. And you're still defending the person who caused all this mess." My mother's face flushed, and for a brief moment, she seemed at a loss for words. But it didn't last long. "You don't understand," she said sharply. "You think you know what's best for the family, but you're wrong. You're pushing everyone away, and for what? So you can be right?" "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I'm pushing back against all the years of being told I'm wrong. I've been the one holding everything together, Mom. Every single time, I've been the one to step in and cover for everyone. And now you want me to back down? To let Clara continue walking all over me and my family? Well, maybe you need to be more forgiving." My father interjected, his tone defensive but weak. "This is what family does, Mark. We forgive each other. We move on." "Forgiveness." I spat, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "No, Dad. You forgive people who actually apologize. You don't forgive people who slap your kid and turn around and blame you for it. You don't forgive people who've never once apologized for the damage they've done." The silence in the room was suffocating. My parents looked at each other, unsure how to respond. They had never seen me like this. Never seen me so unwavering, so determined. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm done trying to keep the peace. I'm done making myself small so everyone else feels comfortable. This isn't about Clara anymore. This is about me, and it's about my family. I won't let you or anyone else make me feel guilty for standing up for what's right. There was a long pause before my mother spoke again. "Mark," she began, her voice softer but still filled with frustration. "You're making a huge mistake. Clara is devastated. She wants to make things right." "No," I said, my voice steady. "If Clara wanted to make things right, she would have done it a long time ago. She wouldn't have slapped my son and then turned around and made herself the victim. She's not the one who's been wronged here." My father sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging as though the weight of the conversation had finally hit him. "We raised you better than this, Mark. You know that, right? We never meant for any of this to happen." "I know how you raised me, Dad," I said quietly, my voice softening. "But it doesn't change the fact that you've always enabled Clara. You've always allowed her to get away with whatever she wanted, while I was always the one who had to fight for everything. I'm done being the one who cleans up the mess." I felt the room grow colder, the finality of my words hanging in the air. "Mark," my mother said one last time, her voice cracking with emotion. "Please, think about what you're doing. Don't let this tear the family apart. Don't throw away everything we've built." "Everything you've built," I corrected her softly. "Not me, not us." The finality in my words hung in the air. My mother didn't say anything else, and my father looked as though he had given up. Without another word, I turned around and walked toward the door, heading into the other room, leaving my parents standing there. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to repair the rift between us, but in that moment, I didn't care. I had made my choice, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally living for myself. It had been a few months since that night at the gala, and life felt quieter now. The storm that had torn through my family had passed, but the aftermath lingered. My relationship with my parents remained strained, but it was different now. They had tried reaching out a few times, but the apologies felt hollow, like they were more about preserving their image than truly understanding the damage done. Clara had gone radio silent, her social media presence now a distant memory. The sponsors she'd relied on had quietly pulled back, one by one, after the fallout from our public clash. Her brand was in shambles, and though I didn't feel satisfaction in it, I wasn't about to pretend I didn't feel a small sense of justice. Clara had finally faced the consequences of her actions, and for the first time, I felt like I had finally stood up to her, even if it had cost me my family. But despite everything that had happened, despite the losses, one thing remained: peace. Real peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, no matter how hard it was. And now, sitting in the backyard of our home on a warm Saturday afternoon, I realized just how much things had changed for the better. I watched as Ethan took his first steps. His chubby little legs wobbled beneath him, and he teetered forward with a big, proud grin on his face. Laura stood beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder as we both watched our son take those tentative steps toward us. "Look at him," Laura whispered, her voice filled with awe. "He's growing so fast." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment that I hadn't known before. The last few months had been about reclaiming my life, my family, and my boundaries. No more putting up with disrespect. No more pretending to be okay with the way things were. It had all led to this moment, our son, walking toward us, free of the weight that had once burdened our family. As Ethan reached us, he fell into my arms, and I lifted him high into the air, his giggles filling the air like music. It felt like a victory, small, but powerful. A victory not just for me, but for Laura and for Ethan. We had built something new, something better, something that wasn't defined by Clara's manipulations or my parents' favoritism. "Isn't this amazing?" I said, turning to Laura. "He's got such a strong little spirit." She nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "He's so lucky to have you, Mark. You're such a great dad." I smiled, a little self-conscious but grateful for her words. "I'm just trying to do right by him. I want him to grow up knowing he's loved and respected. I don't want him to ever feel like I felt growing up, like I was invisible, like my worth only mattered when I was fixing everyone else's problems." "You're doing great," Laura said, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "He'll grow up knowing exactly who he is. You're teaching him the right lessons." The weight of her words settled into my heart, and for the first time in a long while, I felt confident in my place, not just as a father, but as a man. I had learned the hard way that sometimes, standing up for what's right means standing alone. But in the end, it had brought me exactly what I wanted: a life built on love, respect, and the courage to protect what matters. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the backyard, playing with Ethan, laughing, and making memories without the toxic influence of Clara or my parents looming over us. We didn't need them. What we had was enough. Weeks later, I received a message from Irene. I hadn't heard from her since our conversation about Clara's past, and I was surprised when I saw her name on my phone. "Irene, hey Mark, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I know things have been crazy, but I hope you're finding some peace. I've been talking to a few of your cousins, and they've confirmed some things about Clara. It wasn't just you. She's done this to others, and I just want you to know, you're not alone in what happened. You did the right thing, and I'm proud of you." I stared at the message for a long time, the weight of it sinking in. Clara's actions hadn't been isolated. She'd hurt others, too, people I hadn't even known about. It was comforting, in a way, to know that I wasn't the only one who had suffered at her hands. But it also made me even more certain of my decision to stand up for myself, for Laura, and for Ethan. I quickly typed back, feeling a sense of gratitude toward Irene that I hadn't expected. "Mark, thank you, Irene. I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I'm finally starting to feel like I'm in control of my life again. The road's been tough, but I'm doing it. For Ethan, for Laura, for me. And I couldn't have gotten this far without you." The reply came almost immediately. "Irene, you've got this, Mark. I know it's hard, but you've got the strength to move forward. And remember, you've got family who sees you for who you are. You're not invisible anymore." I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair, watching as the sun set over the horizon. The future felt uncertain, yes, but it was mine. It was ours. I had spent years chasing after approval from people who would never give it to me. But now, I was building something different. I was building a family, a life that was based on honesty, respect, and love. And that was all I needed. "Hey," Laura called from across the yard, breaking me from my thoughts. "You coming inside? I made dinner." I stood up, smiling at her. "Yeah, I'm coming. Just taking in the view." She walked over, her smile as warm as the setting sun. As she took my hand, I realized that in the end, everything I had been fighting for had led me here, to this moment, with my family, on my terms. And for the first time in my life, I was finally at peace. I love you, I said quietly, looking into her eyes. I love you too, Laura replied, squeezing my hand. We're going to be okay. As we walked back inside together, the weight of the past began to lift. For the first time, I felt free, completely free. And I knew, no matter what came next, I had built a foundation strong enough to withstand it. Our new beginning had already started, and this time, there would be no turning back.